So I want you to imagine trying to weigh a really delicate chemical sample on a laboratory scale. But the digital display, it's just permanently stuck at 80 grams.
Oh, right. Which is basically a nightmare for any kind of scientist.
Exactly. Every single measurement you take for the rest of your life is going to be completely false. Your data will be skewed, your experiments will fail, and you won't even realize why.
Because you trust the instrument, right?
Trust the instrument. And today's deep dive argues that right now, without you even realizing it, your mind is operating exactly like that broken scale.
It's a pretty intense thought.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. For you listening today, our mission is to explore this profoundly mind-bending philosophical text by Xu Feng. It's titled, Always Remain in the Zero State.
Yeah, and we're specifically focusing on a concept the text calls advanced cultivation.
Which is, I mean, it's just fascinating.
It is a remarkable piece of literature, really, because it takes these incredibly ancient esoteric ideas about human existence and it translates them into a highly practical, mechanical framework for the modern mind.
Yeah.
It builds on a previous work called Feelings of the Middle Way by Cancun Celestial, using that foundation to explore this ultimate concept called the zero state, which the text defines as an environment of emptiness, spirit, and grace.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you are anything like me, the word emptiness usually sounds, I don't know, inherently negative.
Oh, for sure. We're conditioned to see it that way.
Right. We were conditioned to view emptiness as a lack of something, like a void, or a failure to accumulate enough knowledge.
Which is the exact opposite of what the text is actually saying.
Exactly. This text promises to cut right through that philosophical jargon and deliver a major paradigm shift for your own learning journey. To understand this massive, universe-sized concept, the author insists we have to start by observing the basic physical mechanics of the world around us.
We have to ask why nothingness is actually the most useful state of being.
Yeah.
The text provides several concrete metaphors to establish this mechanical law. Returning to your laboratory scale, or say a voltage gauge used by an electrician, the physical utility of those instruments relies entirely on their baseline.
Their starting point.
Right. A scale or a gauge must be set exactly to zero to accurately measure the true weight or voltage of an object. If an electrician tests a wire with a gauge that defaults to a baseline of 20 volts, they risk a lethal miscalculation.
Wow. Yeah.
The instrument simply cannot reflect the true nature of reality unless it begins from absolute nothingness.
And if we map that physical law directly onto human cognition,
Yeah.
I mean, the implications are just staggering. Think about a professional walking into a high-stakes negotiation, or simply, you opening a new book to learn a new skill.
Setting the baseline.
Yes. If their internal mental scale is already set to 80 grams, perhaps heavily weighted by their preconceived notions, their ego, or even just their stress from a bad morning commute, they are mathematically incapable of accurately weighing the new information being handed to them.
Because the scale is off.
Right. They will receive a distorted reading of reality every single time, because they are interpreting the new data only through the heavy filter of their pre-existing 80 grams.
What's fascinating here is that the zero state, in this specific context, it isn't about being broken or unintelligent or somehow erased.
Right.
It is the only state where an object or a biological processor like the human brain is perfectly primed to reflect the true nature of whatever is introduced to it.
Like a blank mirror.
Yeah, exactly. The text points to everyday objects to reinforce this. A drinking cup is only valuable to you because of the empty space inside it.
Right.
If the cup is already filled with cement or, even just yesterday's coffee, its utility is totally destroyed.
And it scales up dramatically from there, too. A massive skyscraper, this architectural marvel requiring millions of dollars and brilliant engineering, it only provides actual value to human beings if the space inside those reinforced walls remains entirely empty.
That's a great point. The utility of the building relies on the zero state of its interior.
Exactly. The text even extends this mechanical law to our technology and agriculture. Like, a computer processor can only function effectively for a user if its processing power isn't already consumed by 100 background applications running silently in the dark.
Which we all know is so frustrating.
Right. Or a farmer's ox. It can only pull the plow if it isn't already exhausted and carrying a heavy burden from the day before. Everything useful in the physical universe must operate from a baseline of zero.
And if the physical architecture of our tools and buildings demands empty space to function, the text implies our cognitive architecture operates under the exact same law.
So it's a direct parallel.
Exactly. If an empty cup is designed to hold fresh water, an empty mind is designed to hold uncorrupted reality. This is really where the text connects some of the greatest philosophical traditions in human history.
Oh, right. It draws a line between them.
Yeah, it draws a direct line between Laozi's concept of wu wei, Buddha's idea of formlessness, and Qiankun Yuanshu's middle way.
Just to give some quick context for those listening, Laozi's Wu Wei is often translated as effortless action or non-action
Yeah.
in Taoism.
Right.
It points to a state of being perfectly in flow with the universe rather than forcing your will upon it. Buddha's formlessness suggests that clinging to rigid concepts of reality leads to suffering.
Which is a huge theme here.
Definitely. And the middle way is about finding the ultimate equilibrium between extreme indulgence and extreme asceticism. So the author is basically arguing that all these ancient wisdoms are actually just different cultural singers pointing at the exact same mechanical noon,
The zero state.
the zero state.
Yeah, and the author uses some incredibly striking, deliberately paradoxical quotes to describe this mental equilibrium.
Like what?
Well, the text states, Buddha nature is tasteless, the greatest creator is soundless. It then introduces a concept that forces a total reevaluation of how we process sensory data. It says, lack of perception is the greatest perception. The feeling of the middle way is to be without feeling. To lack perception is to experience all perception.
Okay, wait. I need to push back on this paradox on behalf of the listener.
Go for it.
Because if the text is arguing that having a mind like a blank slate, completely devoid of perception, is this highly positive ultimate state of existence, doesn't that just describe total numbness?
I see where you're
Like a lobotomy.
Yeah.
If I actively cultivate a lack of perception, doesn't that make me completely ignorant? Just totally disconnected from the vibrant, chaotic, beautiful world around us.
Right, and the awful anticipates that exact resistance. It is a completely natural psychological defense mechanism to equate emptiness with death or apathy.
Yeah, it feels like giving up.
But to clarify the vital difference between numbness and the zero state, the text relies on deeply poetic imagery. It says, as the wind passes through sparse bamboo, the bamboo retains no sound. As geese fly over a cold pond, the pond leaves no reflection.
Man, let's break down the mechanics of that pond metaphor, because it completely changes the definition of observation.
It really does.
When a flock of geese flies over a pond, the surface of the water reflects them perfectly. Every feather, the angle of their wings, the speed of their flight, it is captured flawlessly in real time.
It misses nothing.
Exactly. The
Yeah.
pond is not numb. It is not aggressively ignoring the geese. In fact, because the pond is perfectly still, resting entirely in its zero state, its observation of reality is absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Numbness would be like a frozen pond covered in a foot of snow, completely incapable of reflecting anything.
Right, the zero state is actually hyper-awareness.
Yes, hyper-awareness.
The crucial psychological mechanism lies in what happens the very millisecond the geese fly out of frame. The reflection instantly vanishes. The pond does not desperately attempt to freeze its own water to hold on to the image of the birds.
Oh, wow.
It returns effortlessly to zero. It's completely unburdened, immediately ready to perfectly reflect the clouds or the moon or whatever comes next.
That's a beautiful way to look at it.
The text is illustrating that the zero state isn't about avoiding the feelings of life. It is about experiencing them with absolute clarity and then allowing them to pass without letting them permanently alter your baseline calibration.
Which answers the question of how a modern person might actually apply this. If you get into a frustrating argument during your morning commute, your internal scale immediately registers 80 grams of anger.
Yeah, you're fuming.
Right. But the practice of the zero state isn't to pretend the argument didn't happen or to suppress the anger until you feel numb. It is to observe the anger perfectly as it happens, like the geese over the pond, and then actively let the reflection fade the moment the event is over. You just drop the 80 grams.
Because according to this philosophy, the failure to drop the 80 grams, the human desire to grab the reflection, to freeze the pond, to permanently attach ourselves to an experience or an identity, is the absolute mechanical root of all human suffering.
Now, the author makes a remarkably bold, uncompromising claim here. The text explicitly states that clinging to any specific matter, thing, theory, religion, political party, nation, family, or person means deviating from the Tao.
And distancing oneself from the zero state.
Yes.
The text really leaves no room for cultural exceptions. From the ultimate vantage point of the zero state, all of humanity's suffering is viewed as entirely man-made, caused exclusively by our collective, desperate straying from absolute zero.
So what does this all mean? I have to be honest, it is incredibly jarring to see things like family and nation listed right alongside political parties or rigid theories as concepts we absolutely must not cling to.
It pushes against basically everything we are taught.
Exactly. If you look at the modern world, human beings are fundamentally obsessed with identity. We construct our entire self-worth by taking sides.
Right.
We are celebrated for our deep national pride, our fierce familial loyalty, and our unwavering dedication to our moral beliefs. Society generally tells us that clinging tightly to these specific constructs is exactly what makes someone a good, honorable person.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture and impartially break down the underlying logic of the text without endorsing or criticizing it, it makes a strict mathematical kind of sense.
Okay, lay it out.
Recall the laboratory scale. If you attach your core identity to these human constructs, no matter how noble, biologically ingrained, or universally praised those constructs might be, your internal scale is no longer at zero.
Right.
You have placed a permanent heavy weight on the tray.
You are walking through your entire life permanently set to 80 grams.
Yes. And once you are permanently calibrated to 80, you lose the ability to see the universe as it actually functions. You lose what the text calls the unity between heaven and humanity, because you are forever viewing the vast, infinitely complex universe through a heavily biased, localized microscopic lens.
That makes a lot of sense.
The author goes so far as to state that from the perspective of ultimate emptiness, even humanity's many cherished moral frameworks and value systems are seen as mistaken.
Because morals and values, in the mechanical framework of this text, are just more weights we invent to put on the scale.
Exactly.
They are rigid rules we construct to try and control the reflections on the pond, attempting to dictate which geese are allowed to fly overhead rather than simply letting the water be still.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
If a person strongly identifies with a specific nation, they become mathematically incapable of viewing global conflicts objectively. Their internal scale is mechanically rigged to favor their side.
Right?
If someone clings desperately to a specific scientific or economic theory, they will subconsciously reject any new data that disproves it, because letting go of the theory feels like destroying a piece of their own identity.
Clinging creates a rigid cognitive structure in the mind. In the physical world, rigid structures are fragile. They shatter when they inevitably clash with a larger, unstoppable force.
Wow.
In the psychological world, rigid identities cause profound pain when they inevitably clash with the fluid, ever-changing nature of reality. The text argues that by refusing to cling to these human constructs, we remove the friction that generates all of our psychological and societal suffering.
We stop going to war over whose frozen reflection is the correct one.
Precisely.
It is a radical, almost terrifying way to view existence. It raises a very real fear for anyone attempting this kind of advanced cultivation. If I systematically let go of all my cherished theories, my political affiliations, my deeply held moral frameworks, and my clinging to my own family identity, well, what is actually left?
It sounds empty.
Doesn't the removal of all those defining weights just leave a dark, nihilistic, empty void?
That fear is the ultimate illusion the text seeks to shatter. We have established that the zero state acts as a defensive mechanism, preventing suffering by keeping the scale balanced, but it is not merely a shield.
Okay.
And it is certainly not a dead, apathetic void. The author insists that the zero state is, in reality, the ultimate source of power, transformation, and creation.
Yeah, the text explicitly states that the zero state is not emptiness, but is actually the root of life. It claims this precise state of absolute zero holds the mysteries of heaven and earth, endless transformations, and countless phenomena.
It's an engine.
Yeah. The author uses this incredible phrase, it is nothing, yet it contains everything.
To illustrate this concept of power emerging from nothingness, the text points to the paradoxes of ultimate mastery found in martial and spiritual arts.
Oh, this part is so cool.
It tells us that the highest level of swordsmanship is to have no sword. The ultimate mental practice is to have no mind. The most profound Buddha Dharma is to be entirely without Buddha. And the greatest self is the absolute absence of self.
I mean, it sounds like an esoteric riddle until the text grounds it in physical science one last time.
Right.
It brings up the concept of idling vehicles. A massive engine sitting at idle, entirely in neutral, isn't doing nothing. It is perfectly primed, operating without friction, ready to instantly transfer immense torque in any direction the moment the transmission is engaged.
It's pure readiness.
Yes. It also mentions the Earth itself, pointing out that the soil nurtures billions of complex forms of plant life, Precisely because the Earth remains in a constant receptive zero state, allowing life to spring from it without trying to dictate the shape of the leaves.
The author then introduces a scientific concept that perfectly encapsulates the staggering power of this state. The text discusses the mechanics of energy differentials.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When the text brings up energy differentials, it is directly invoking the concept of potential energy.
Yeah.
Think of the immense, silent tension on a heavy bowstring drawn all the way back, held perfectly still right before the arrow is released. Or a highly pressurized system waiting for a valve to open. That absolute stillness before the release that is the zero state.
It's not passive at all.
No, being at absolute zero isn't about being drained of energy. It is the state of highest possible potential energy. It is limitless power waiting to be unleashed in a fraction of a second.
This raises an important question about how we in our frantic modern lives define the concept of action.
How so?
Well, society conditions us to view action as constant movement. Hustling, stressing, aggressively advocating for our rigid ideologies, constantly doing something to prove we exist.
We're always in motion.
Right. But true, universe-altering action, the kind of profound creation that actually shifts reality, does not come from a frantic, cluttered mind operating with a broken scale.
It emerges entirely from the stillness.
Exactly. Striving for the zero state is about returning to what the text calls the gateway to all wonders. The author describes this as moving toward the state of celestial beings, moving toward the Tathagata.
Right, which is a term often used in Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah, to describe the ultimate unconditioned reality, or one who has arrived at the absolute truth unburdened by ego. The ultimate goal of this advanced cultivation is to clear out all the mental clutter, drop the heavy clinging to identity, and remove the false weights permanently pressing down on your scale.
So you can finally be free.
When you do finally choose to act in the world, you aren't acting out of narrow ego or tribal bias. You are acting in perfect accordance with reality, with the full, uninhibited power of the universe behind you. You become the drawn bowstring, releasing its energy flawlessly without a millimeter of wasted friction.
That completely rewires the paradigm of what it means to be a powerful or effective human being.
It really does.
So let's distill this incredible philosophical journey for you, the listener. We started by examining the physical world, the empty cups designed to hold fresh water, the precisely calibrated laboratory scales that give us truth rather than distortion. We realized that physical utility demands a baseline of nothingness.
Right. We then moved inward, discovering that our cognitive architecture requires the exact same baseline. We explored the unclouded mind that reflects reality perfectly in the present moment, like a still pond reflecting geese in flight, perfectly observing the world without frantically trying to freeze the water to trap their image.
And we navigated the profound, often uncomfortable dangers of human clinging. We explored the text argument that attaching our core identities to man-made constructs, our favorite theories, our political tribes, and even our nations permanently tips our internal scale.
Which causes real harm.
Yeah, this clinging heavily distorts our perception of reality, generating a massive amount of unnecessary societal friction and man-made suffering.
And finally, we arrived at the immense coiled potential energy of the zero state. We learned that the ultimate emptiness is not a dead, nihilistic void, but the very root of all life. It is the idling engine in perfect neutral, the drawn bowstring ready to unleash ultimate, uncorrupted power.
If we bring this directly back to your own life as someone who actively seeks out new knowledge, who wants to be truly well-informed and highly effective in whatever field you operate in, the ultimate takeaway here is a radical shift in your entire strategy of learning.
Because it's not about adding more.
Exactly. True wisdom and deep understanding might not actually be about aggressively accumulating more facts, reading more books, and layering on more data to fill your mental cup to the brim.
Sometimes the absolute most effective shortcut to being well-informed isn't adding more weight to your intellect. It is the daily, deliberate practice of returning your mind to zero.
Right.
It is consciously pressing the tear button on your own cognition, allowing yourself to accurately weigh new perspectives, incoming challenges, and radically different ideas without the heavy distortion of your past assumptions.
It requires trusting that by emptying yourself of rigid opinions, you are not losing your intelligence or your identity, you are entirely optimizing it.
It's incredibly liberating once you grasp it.
It is a beautiful, highly challenging framework for existence.
Yeah.
But as we wrap up this deep dive into Xu Feng's philosophy, we want to leave you with a final, lingering thought to mull over on your own. A question that builds on this profound source material, but forces it to collide with the everyday reality of the human heart.
The text teaches that reaching the ultimate zero state requires us not to cling to absolutely anything. Not to grand theories, not to powerful nations, and crucially, not even to our own families or deeply personal identities.
So the question for you to explore as you go about your day is this. If reaching the ultimate zero state requires us not to cling to anything, not even deeply held theories, nations, or our own families, how do we authentically love others and actively participate in human society while remaining completely empty?
Yeah.
If the greatest self is the absolute absence of self, who exactly is the one experiencing the beauty of the world?
It is a question that requires its own kind of stillness to answer.
It really is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Let your pond be still, and we will catch you next time.